I kind of grew up in an environment where everybody knew everybody.
Right.
We went to help people, like if somebody was having difficulty harvesting, or I'm from a generation that women were very much kind of seen in that traditional at-home role. My mom had wanted to become a teacher, but her dad sent her to work as a housekeeper as soon as she was able to work at the time, according to the laws. I had a relative that committed suicide. People did end up in mental health facilities, but it was often talked about in a whisper. So at a very young age, surprisingly enough, I started becoming quite involved in kind of almost leadership type positions. Profession that I was in was somewhat self-limiting, but by that time I was exposed to social workers, and I was exposed to OTs, and I was exposed to all these professions.
Hello, Sat Sri Akal, Namaste, Adab. Friends, I'm Sharon Ali, and you're watching Hunny Walia Shows. In today's episode of Through the Eyes of a Woman, we have with us Anne Henry. Anne, thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you for inviting me.
So Anne, you were born and raised in Alberta. Tell us what your childhood was like. What were some of your interests as a child?
Okay, I was raised in a rural environment, actually on my mother's side of the family. Surprisingly enough, my great uncle was one of the first Caucasian children born in the district. So they kind of were early pioneers. And growing up in kind of a rural environment where my family, on my mother's side, really kind of settled. It actually became a community. So you kind of knew everybody within your community. So I kind of grew up in an environment where everybody knew everybody. We went to help people, like if somebody was having difficulty harvesting, or somebody was sick, women would take over casseroles. If a farmer got sick, the farmers would go and help with them in their fields. So it was very much supporting each other in the community. You know, within a rural community, quite often the church was a very important focal point. You know, so quite often you would, particularly in a Christian community, I have actually both Catholic and Christian, Protestant on my side of the family. You know, church was very much the center, community get-togethers, concerts. The school also was very much a focal part, but often it was about supporting each other, you know, and supporting people within that community. And so probably from my early childhood, I probably learned that listening to people became really important. Probably one of my most fondest memories growing up was my mother. People would come over and they would visit, and quite often as a small child I would hide underneath the table and listen to what was being talked about. But often, thinking back in terms of what I do now in terms of mental health, you know, women got together to talk, and they would kind of work through problems within the home, and they would talk about, you know, what are the issues. But surprisingly enough, like mental health was not a topic that was well known, or people talked about, even though it was prevalent. You know, suicide did occur. I had a relative that committed suicide. People did end up in mental health facilities, but it was often talked about in a whisper. And so, you know, but there's a sense of community, but there was these taboo kind of topics, one being mental health. And surprising over the years, as I found, if you listen, people would open up and share things. And even as a young child, I would have adults telling me about their issues. Which was, I always was quite surprised. You know?
That is interesting.
Just, you know, kind of some of the struggles that they were going through. And which really kind of taught me the value of listening to people.
Absolutely.
You know, quite often in society, if you think about, we don't listen all that carefully. And so for myself, growing up as a female, you know, typically you were either a housewife, a farmer's wife, you maybe be a teacher. I came from a lot of teachers in my family. And or else you became a nurse. You know, women I didn't realize women could have other occupational such as occupational therapy or became a lawyer or became those things.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm from a generation that women were very much kind of seen in that traditional at-home role.
Right, right.
And so but fortunately my family supported education.
Oh, that's great. Great to hear.
So even though my father only completed grade 3,
Oh, okay.
because the war broke out where
Okay,
he
yeah.
came from, he never fulfilled his education, but he always wanted to. My mom had wanted to become a teacher,
Okay.
but her dad sent her to work as a housekeeper
Yeah.
as soon as she was able to work at the time, according to the laws. But that didn't stop them from supporting us for pursuing our education. So out of the 4 siblings, 3 of us managed to get a secondary education.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
And, you know, I was fortunate to come from a school where I was pretty well with the same 26 kids from the time grade 1 all the way to high school.
You're kidding. Wow.
So
So you all grew up together.
we grew up together.
Nice.
And so you kind of, I always said, living in a rural community, in the community I grew up, everybody knew your business
Yeah.
before you did. And which had some disadvantages at that time. You know, but it was interesting, the whole fact that the community was involved.
Right.
There was kind of a sense of kind of that control within that community.
Right, right.
So kind of people knew which kids were kind of getting into trouble. Often, you know, parents would kind of focus on, promoting those positive behaviors within the community.
Yeah.
So at a very young age, surprisingly enough, I started becoming quite involved in kind of almost leadership type positions.
Okay, okay.
When I was in grade, and actually we're talking about drama there, being an actress
Yeah.
from your previous interview, I became involved in drama.
Okay,
And probably that was one of the most enlightening things, and the thing that's probably helped me throughout my whole career was drama.
Okay, yeah.
But it also gave me the confidence to take on roles. So even age 14, I was put in charge of the head of our Sunday school, even though there was these older women.
Wow, that's impressive.
Well, it's impressive, but I keep thinking, what were they thinking? Getting a 14-year-old to help out was, kind of running the services for the children.
Right, right.
But it did teach me about working with people from older backgrounds and younger backgrounds, In my household, I was much a very afterthought. My oldest sister's 20 years older than I.
Oh, okay, okay.
And the closest siblings to me is 11 years older.
Oh.
So in a lot of ways, I kind of grew up by myself.
Yeah.
But I also had to learn to become part of the community.
Yes, yeah.
So a lot of it is with the activities within the school, activities within the church, it helped to foster who I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I started off, like I said, the only professions that were really available to women at the time were you either became a nurse or you became a teacher.
Right.
One of my biology teachers took me aside, and you're smart enough to become a doctor. And I kind of thought about it for a while.
Yeah.
And, but it's that whole sense as being a woman, and only doctors I knew at the time were male.
Yes, yeah.
And so that seemed like a really huge step for me.
Right.
So I went into nursing because my mom was very sick at the time.
Okay.
And I thought, well, this is the way I can help her. So I started off in nursing and actually did quite well in the program, but I didn't like some of the politics of the program at the time.
Okay.
So I decided to go into family studies.
Okay.
Partly thinking I'll become a home economist within the rural areas, which at that time was helping people learning how to cook, how to can, how to preserve food, food safety, because I have a very much an interest in food and cooking and food preparation. And so out of that, I end up getting a job. The first job I get is as a professional. I had worked during the summer times as an institutional aide was working at Alberta Hospital Ponoka, or Centennial Centre, teaching people how to cook and how to live with mental health issues.
Oh, okay.
And so I did that for a number of years, working with brain injury, working with individuals, develop programs, help people gain the skills so they were able to return back to the community. But I recognized the profession that I was in was somewhat self-limiting. But by that time, I was exposed to social workers, and I was exposed to OTs, and I was exposed to all these professions. And even though I had already been to school for a number of years, I thought, well, let's go back to school again.
Great idea. So was this all in Ponoka that all this occurred? Your schooling and your...
I came back to Edmonton to complete my schooling. And so I decided to become a social worker at the time. And so because I had friends that were social workers, and I could see they were helping people get reestablished into the community. So I actually worked in the inner city, working with geriatric individuals. Many of them had addictions issues. You know, people that were homeless, people that were, you know, had multiple issues. But when you start listening to their stories, getting back to listening, many of them had been very successful in their life. You know, people that used to repair planes, used to be pilots, used to own large tracts of land.
You're kidding.
And got into drinking, or something happened within their family, and they lost it all. And I think that's the one thing that in my field I've learned, because I worked with brain injury and dementias and things like that. You can have your life together one day, and you can be falling apart the next day. And it's that, you know, and people, I remember somebody talking about a person being mentally ill. They look fine on the outside, but they're not fine on the inside. And I think a lot of people really struggle with that. You know, I know in a lot of cultures, they don't even want to still talk about a member that have mental health issues. They're almost embarrassed, which is a shame. Because 1 in 5 now will seek mental health treatment at some point in their life. So it's fairly high. So I did the inner city for a while, and I got approached about coming out to Alberta Hospital Edmonton to work as a social worker. And so I worked with the developmental disabled population for a number of years, and then I kind of was working a more complex issue. And then I got approached about going into management.
Oh, nice.
You know, so I never really sought out management. Leadership often found me. Which,
as a child too.
Even as a child. And so I took on a role that I was probably quite inadequately prepared for. You know, I remember first, you know, and this really talks about women needing to take risk.
Absolutely.
You know, and over the years, I've been in positions where I've been the only female around a board table. You know, and I never thought I was out of place. I've learned over the years, if you feel you need to belong and you have something to contribute, then you are going to be, you have a right to be at that table.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, so through those experiences, I've kind of learned your gender doesn't stop you from achieving with what you want to achieve.
Absolutely.
I came from a very traditional background. You know, where women were in the house, they cooked and cleaned, but if you're a farmer's wife, you helped out on the farm. To recognizing that, you can be in leadership positions. You can, you know, take on, you know, become a lawyer and such.
And so how did you learn that you can do this kind of thing, just as your way through education and
through education, but also you start to meet role models. And probably there's a couple women down in Ponoka that I absolutely admired. You know, they had tenacity, and they were head of the social work department at that time. And they really talked about standing on principle and standing up for what's right. And I learned about what we call big A advocacy and little A advocacy.
Okay.
And quite often and even now I'm finding a lot of people are afraid to speak up about if there's something that they see that is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
In terms of injustices and stuff.
Yeah.
But these women had no fear, as I call it. And, you know, so there was something going on at the time, and they asked me to take a petition around.
Oh, okay.
And basically, this petition at the time probably could have gotten me fired if they had gotten. But I found out later we actually were guaranteed some protection by the government at the time.
Okay.
For actually doing it, because they knew there were some issues there. And so I remember taking this petition around thinking that this could be really career ending for me.
Yeah.
But I pursued and persist, and ended up making the right kind of changes that needed to occur at that time.
Oh, that's great. Great.
And so I guess in terms of women, quite often we're afraid to take risk.
Yeah, absolutely. This petition, did you find that you had a lot of supporters for that, or?
I had to get a certain number of signatures, and I was managed to get that.
Okay.
And so what I end up doing is building confidence and, you know, connecting to the people I knew that helped me to gather those signatures. And then I found out a lot of people were involved in other kind of activities at the time that actually were contributing to trying to address the issue. But it was that whole underground society. But then all of a sudden, these two ladies have decided, no, let's try to bring this out and try to implement real change.
Right.
So I'm not going to go into the details at the time, but it was learning that, yeah, you can take risks regardless of your age. And it may work out, and it may not.
Were you hesitant at all? Were you ever wondering, like, why didn't these ladies do it themselves? Why did they ask you to do it? Did it kind of...
Part of it, they said, Anne, you're well known around within the hospital. You probably can approach a lot of different people and get the signatures that we needed.
Okay.
And so I remember thinking, okay, they can explain why. That seemed like a just cause.
Yeah.
And there was a couple times, I have to admit, it was a bit tense, thinking, oh, I was at a get-together, and there was people that were probably sitting on the fence.
Okay.
But there was some other people that stepped up that were good friends with them to support me in that at that time.
Yeah.
And so they never came forward that I was actually involved in all this.
Okay.
But and so when I spoke afterwards, they were very thankful. And that's when we found out I did have job protection, but they didn't tell me that up front.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I still kind of amused. That would have been probably eased my mind during some part of this process.
Yeah.
So the joke with my colleague at the time says, yeah, we may be without a job while we were doing this. But part of it is, I think, you know, nowadays you see people standing up for the rights, diversity, inclusiveness, etc.
Absolutely.
And I think that really reflects we can never lose that ability to speak up, because you see countries where people are not allowed to speak up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what happens is oppression.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, but my interest has always been in the area of mental health.
Okay.
And I think quite often as individuals, people are afraid to say, I have an issue.
Right.
Even within healthcare, we find stigma among workers that have mental health issues.
Okay, yeah.
You know, I know some people that work in healthcare, and they've said to me, Anne, I'm afraid to tell my colleagues because they're going to think something less of me.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest issue.
Yeah. Which is unfortunate. And so people delay seeking treatment until it gets almost too late.
Yeah.
It gets into a bigger crisis. And, you know, I'm glad for initiatives like Bell, you know, people talk. Let's talk.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, within the different communities, mental health tends to predominate.
Yeah.
Some communities are much more open about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But quite often if somebody has diabetes or cancer, we all are very empathetic.
Yeah.
But Margaret is having a manic episode.
Yeah.
We tend to judge.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's what brings out the fear, right? And people actually coming out and telling us that they have a problem, that there's something wrong.
And I think that's where this, getting back to learning about listening under the table, is about learning to listen. And I think we can support each other, like the women did around the quilting circle, or coming around the strawberry tea, or the kind of the get-togethers.
Right, right.
It became a form of sharing stories and supporting each other in a non-judgmental way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's I was out with my daughter and one of her friends last week, and one of the parts of the conversation went to by them was, we've lost the art of conversation.
Yes, I agree.
And, you know, so we need to get back having conversations. We need to have conversations with our neighbors, regardless of their cultural background, regardless of their beliefs. You know, I have learned so much from women from many different backgrounds, and there's things that I think are great with each of the cultures. There's things that are great within my own culture, which I raised with. And I think in terms of mental health, we can understand we all struggle at some point. Mood is kind of like one of those things that all of us think we're all very much a straight line is our mood.
Right.
Most of our mood is up and down. Everybody will be depressed at some point.
Yes. Yeah. I agree.
Everybody will have anxiety at a point. Everybody has a bit of OCD in them. And what I mean by OCD is that, you know, there's certain people that will check that lock 3 times.
Yes. Yeah.
Or, you know, you're rearranging your notes all the time, or you're double checking you have everything in a certain order. You know, we reflect it into different degrees.
Right, right.
When it becomes an issue is when we seem to lose control over that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you've worked a lot with people with mental disorders and such. Has it ever affected you as a person, listening to all these stories, going through what they've been through? I guess you kind of put yourself in that, to some degree, in their place and see how they feel. Like, has it ever affected you in any sense?
Probably the stories that affect me the most are the ones where I hear parents that have been very abusive to their children.
Right, right.
And then we see the after effect of that. Trauma, we can't underestimate the issue of trauma. My daughter says, I was raised in a household where no one yelled at each other. This
is your household?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah.
My daughter says, you know, we never yelled in our household. And so when she hears other people yelling in other households, her friends, surprisingly enough, when I start talking, a lot of them are estranged from their families.
Right, right.
You know, and it was interesting, last night my daughter was over and she said, what did you think of my friend? And I said, yeah, she was nice. Well, she really liked you. And you know, and I found out she's been estranged from her mother. And that's really interesting. I'm finding a lot of young people are now becoming estranged from their families. And you just have to wonder why.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think, you know, and for me, listening to people's stories, it's the abuse. But also what brings me sadness is people that maybe have somebody within their family and they're afraid to bring him out to seek treatment, encourage them to get treatment.
Yeah, yeah.
Because with certain disorders, if you don't get treatment, you know, if you can get treatment early on, and it's not just medications, often it's talk therapy. It's about problem solving, it's about reframing, it's about trying to put things back together. Then, you know, that's how you can help people heal. But again, it comes down to listening.
Yeah, Absolutely, absolutely. So with your experience dealing with mental disorders and brain injuries and such, how often or how long do you find it takes for, I guess, a person to get back to normal life? Or is there a time period? Does it depend on the individual?
It's very much dependent on the individual. It's dependent on the diagnosis, dependent on, the longer people, even with schizophrenia, quite often when we hear that term, people get nervous.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And they used to be the joke kind of when I was early on in my career is you don't catch it from the toilet seats.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talking to somebody that has mental health issues, you're not going to get it. It's not going to affect you.
Right.
And what people often want is people to be non-judgmental.
Yes, that is a big issue, I find. Yeah.
Quite often I've learned to say to people when they maybe have some very bizarre notions or beliefs that people are out to get them, acknowledge this as, I'm sorry that you're going through this right now. You feel that this must be really tough for you. It doesn't take a lot to validate their experience. But think about when somebody validates you, when you're talking to them, it actually empowers you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you hear their words? Do you hear what they're saying?
Right.
And sometimes, some people never fully recover.
Okay.
And, some people, it's a lifelong journey of staying well and maintaining function. Unfortunately, some people, because of the nature of the illness, because some of it's biological, there's many different factors, they may never fully recover.
Right, right.
But there's people that have significant mental health issues that absolutely will, are working, and you would not know it unless they told you their story.
Yeah.
But the big thing is, in those cases, the people that are successful are the people that reached out and get help.
Yeah.
And so I really encourage, regardless of what background, if you see somebody struggling, listen to them, but encourage them to seek help. That's how we can help society recover.
Yeah.
This year, the last year with COVID, we know eating disorders are up 200%.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. Because of COVID.
Yes. People are at home, so they eat more.
Yes.
Body image.
Yes.
People afraid they're getting fat, so they're starving. Anxiety does stupid things to our brains. And so we think people may stop eating.
Yeah.
And so it can become very much an issue. Depression's up.
Depression, I can see. Yeah.
Anxiety is up.
Yeah.
And think about it. There's a lot of things we can't control right now.
Yeah.
We control by, wearing a mask and using hand sanitizer and social distancing. But people have been living almost in a state of a bit of a crisis over the last year. And the impact of the mental health disorders from even COVID alone will go on for a long time.
Right.
And a lot of it, part of it's due to socialization.
Yes. Yeah.
Also touch. Quite often we undervalue how much touch is important in our lives.
Yeah.
I know within your culture, a lot of the women like to hug and kiss each other, and and the first few times, I have to admit, it kind of took a little getting used to. What's going on here? Why
a little too friendly?
But I recognize, and that's the beauty of your culture, the whole kind of welcoming, part of it.
Yeah.
But once we start taking those kind of things that ground us away, so we have to create new ways of grounding ourselves.
That's right. Yeah.
We have to find new ways to kind of keep us, moving forward. In terms of COVID, yeah, it's affected all of us.
Yeah.
In terms of our own mental health.
Absolutely.
There's days you think, is this ever going to end?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're fearful, am I taking this home to my family?
Yeah.
In the beginning, a lot of people were hyper vigilant. People are relaxing more, but we also know barriers work. I can touch somebody's hand and not die.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And so I think it's going to take a while after everybody, until we get herd immunity, to kind of start build back in some of those components that normalize everything for individuals.
Right, right.
But I think the most important thing we can do to our friends, and even quite often if you take a moment, just listen to the tone. Even when people are masked, look at their eyes.
Okay. Yeah.
Quite often the eyes, people think we look at the mouth to say whether they're happy or not. You look at the eyes.
Yeah, yeah. The eyes are another factor.
Eyes are another factor. Are they maintaining good eye contact?
Right, right.
And so I can tell, people can tell if I'm happy behind a mask.
Yeah.
People can tell if I'm sad. I have very light eyelashes. I wear makeup, so my eyes do stand out.
Yeah.
But, part of it is learning to listen. And if somebody hesitates or you listen, look at their shoulders, look how they're walking.
Right.
That often will tell us more about their mood than the words.
Than the words themselves. And thank you so much. You've been a wealth of information. Thank you for sharing everything with us, your life's journey through nursing, through social working. Thank you so much. And with all the information you've given us about COVID too and how it's affected us emotionally and mentally. Thank you once again for being on our show.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
And to our viewers out there, thank you so much for all your love and support. For more Hunny Walia shows, log on to our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much and have a great day.